Welcome to Classes of Mail. Before you listen, you should know that Alan Gigax is not in any sense an official spokesman for the Post Office, the NALC, or anybody else. His opinions are inherently his own and should probably be disregarded. Same for his guests. Any information you hear on this podcast could be wrong and should not be relied upon for any reason. Enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classes of Mail. It's time to do a little bit of teaching, and this is something that I teach in the Carrier Academy, and it's important that you guys know about it. We have two general classes of mail, preferential and non-preferential. These classes of mail, this part of the Carrier Academy is the primary reason why I started this podcast, because too many people just don't have this information. And so I want to go over the different classes of mail and what you're supposed to do with them. The most important thing is to know what you can put into your UBBM hamper that will wind up being shredded and recycled. So our mail falls into these two basic categories, preferential mail and non-preferential mail. And so I'm going to start listing different classes of mail, and I'm going to put them into these categories as appropriate. So let's start off with one that we know is going to be preferential. It's really obvious, and that is first class mail. So hopefully I'm being picked up on this other microphone as well. I bet I am. All right, we'll go with green here. So under preferential, we will put first class. There we go, first class. All right, hopefully you can read that. And oh, that sounds a lot better. Well, that's my auxiliary mic. It is what it is. All right, so anyway, first class mail is preferential. Now, every piece of mail that goes up here under preferential has two things in common. And preferential for us as letter carriers really only means two things. It means that it's not supposed to be delayed, it shall not be delayed, and it means that if it's undeliverable, it cannot be destroyed. It can't be thrown into the UBBM hamper. So with first class mail, this is really obvious. Like you mail off that Christmas card to grandma and you want it to get to her on time. And so when that Christmas card comes into your station, into your route, it's supposed to be delivered the day it arrives at your route. And then if for some reason it's not deliverable, then we want that piece of mail forwarded to where grandma lives now, or we want it returned to sender with a carrier endorsement that explains why it wasn't able to be delivered. Maybe it was insufficient address. You forgot to put grandma's apartment number at the assisted living where she's staying now. Or maybe it was no such number. You messed up the number. Or, whatever the reasons are. We have other episodes that are devoted to carrier endorsements. But again, because it's preferential mail, it has those two things in common. It's not supposed to be delayed, and it cannot be destroyed. So let's talk about other preferential mail classes. Let me write the next one up here. And this one is also pretty obvious. Express. So express, or we call it priority mail express now, that's, contracts or items that have to be there, right away. And express can't be delayed, obviously. The whole idea is that it gets there as fast as possible. And then if it's undeliverable, it needs to either be forwarded or returned to sender as appropriate. So that's express mail. Next, priority. Priority mail, same thing. That if it's not deliverable, has to either be forwarded or returned as appropriate. Think about like you're mailing that box, a shoe box with shoes in it across the country. If those shoes aren't deliverable, you don't want those to go into the shredder and just get recycled. You want them forwarded or you want them back. So like if you're an eBay seller, you're going to sell them to somebody else instead. Whatever the reason is, it falls into this category of preferential mail. All right, let's talk about another one. Periodicals. Periodicals are a preferential mail class, and periodical is another word for a magazine. When I started at the post office way back in 2006, we got tons of periodicals. There were periodicals for everything. I mean, some of the periodicals that don't really exist anymore, like Cosmopolitan and People Magazine, and I don't know, they may exist in some small numbers now. But periodicals are a preferential mail class. Now, with all of the mail classes that we're going to talk about, the way that you can tell that the way that you can tell what the class of mail is that you look at the postage. And generally, it's going to say right on the postage what class of mail it is. Like a stamp will say first class right on it, or it'll say forever, which is the value of a first class stamp. If it's a priority, then it'll be in a box with the red borders around it, or it'll say priority in the postage, or there'll be a P if it's like a package label, P for priority, or an E for express, or whatever it is, it says so right in the postage. Periodicals are a little bit different because in some cases, periodicals don't have postage on them at all. There will be just the address label, and the postage is actually written on the inside. They have like a special permit, and if you turn to the first couple pages or the last couple pages, then it'll say in there somewhere like periodicals postage has been paid at such and such office. And as a carrier, it's not something that you're going to go searching for. It's more just a general thing that, like, if it looks like a magazine and you don't see any obvious postage on it, it's probably a periodical, and it should be treated as such. And periodicals, old-timers actually call that second-class mail. It is a preferential mail class. And just like every other preferential mail class, we as carriers treat it the same way. It doesn't get thrown into the shredder. It doesn't go into the UBBM. And if it's not deliverable, it has to either be forwarded or returned. And it can't be delayed. So those are your preferential mail classes. They're probably more than I'm listing here. In fact, I know there's some more that I'm going to get to in just a minute. But what I really want to talk about is the non-preferential mail classes, because these are a lot more important to what I'm trying to teach here, which is what can and cannot go into the UBBM hamper. So non-preferential mail classes all have two things in common. Unlike preferential mail classes, A, they can be delayed. They can't be delayed by you. As a carrier, you don't have the authority to delay mail, but management can instruct you to delay mail, and they can be delayed up to the third day. So you think about if you're in one of those places that gets the weekly grocery ads. Those have postage on them, but it's of a non-preferential mail class. In fact, I might as well go ahead and write it down now. Those typically come standard. So standard is a non-preferential mail class. And so on those weekly ads, there'll be an address on them, typically, that's not always addressed. And it'll have postage, and it says standard. So standard is a non-preferential mail class. So that means that it can be delayed by management, not by you. And if it's not deliverable, it can go into the UBBM. Because you think about that weekly ad in particular, let's say that it's going to grandma's house, and grandma has moved to Florida because she's retired, and that's what retirees do. So the local ad, the people who put the ads together locally that have your local grocery store in them, do they want to pay this big fee to have that ad forwarded to her in Florida? No, of course not. It's not worth it to the mailer to send that off, for all the extra postage it would cost to send that off to Florida. So they don't want it forwarded. And by the same token, do they want those ads back? Like if you're the Advo company or whatever company makes yours, do you want to get a bunch of undeliverable ads back? What would you do with them? It's a waste. They would just get recycled. And so they tell us, hey, if those aren't deliverable, just go ahead and recycle them for us. And that's what makes it non-preferential. So there are 4 classes of mail that are non-preferential. One of them is standard, obviously, and I'm going to write down the other ones right now. In addition to standard, we have nonprofit, we have marketing, and we have BPM, which stands for bound printed matter. These are like your big, thick catalogs, things like that. All 4 of these classes get treated the exact same. It doesn't matter whether it's standard or marketing, it gets treated the exact same way. First and foremost, our job is to deliver it. And honestly, 95% of the mail you get, you don't even need to look at the class because it's just going to go into the mailbox, and we're going to deliver it because it's a piece of mail that has postage and has an address. This stuff only comes into play when that piece of mail is undeliverable or if for some reason it needs to be delayed. And when it gets delayed, it can be delayed up to the third day. So our weekly ads, for example, where I deliver, they come in on Tuesdays. And so by management instruction, they can either be delivered Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Thursday is the last day that they can be delayed. Where you work, you probably get every door direct mail that comes from the pizza company or the Chinese restaurant or whatever it is, or the gym is sending out an ad. It's an every door direct mail. It has like a simplified address on it. And those are going to come typically standard or marketing. Doesn't matter. It's non-preferential. It can be delayed by management up to the third day, and then it has to be delivered. And then if it's undeliverable for whatever reason, then it goes into the UBBM hamper where it's going to be recycled. So the carrier endorsements that I briefly touched on for the preferential mail, those same endorsements apply to non-preferential mail, where you have to have a valid reason for non-delivery. I don't feel like delivering the ads is not a valid reason for non-delivery. There has to be, attempted not known, no such number. For the weekly ads that just say resident, attempted not known isn't going to work because there's not even a name on there. Whoever lives there can take them. Generally, the only reason that those weekly ads or an every door direct mail is going to be undeliverable is because the unit or that address is vacant. And so vacant is a valid reason for non-delivery. So you're putting the mail in the boxes at the apartment complex, and then that one is vacant. Okay, that ad is going to go into the UBBM hamper. So I know that there are other preferential mail classes that I'm not thinking of at the moment. It doesn't really matter because as long as you know these four at the bottom, the four that are below this red line, you know everything there is to know about classes of mail. There could be 10 different... Oh, in fact, I remember now some of the other preferential classes of mail. I'm going to go ahead and write them down. Let me grab my green marker here. And we have business reply. So business reply mail are those prepaid postage envelopes that go back like for a survey or you send your bill back in or whatever it is. You've all seen business reply mail. Business reply mail is a preferential class of mail, and so if it's undeliverable, it can't just go into the UBBM. Now, an important note with business reply is when, like, let's say in a magazine, like a periodical, you get these things that are called blow-ins, and it's just like a card, and it's business reply mail. It's maybe the subscription card. Well, if that falls out of the magazine, that's actually not mail at all. That's garbage. You can throw that into the UBBM. But once it's filled out, then it becomes essentially first-class mail. It is a preferential mail class, has to be treated as such. And the same goes for the business reply envelopes. If they're empty and they're unsealed, then they're just paper. But as soon as something gets put in there and it gets sealed up, it is treated like a first-class piece of mail. Let's talk about another one. Franked mail. Forgive my handwriting, at least you can hear what I'm saying. So franked mail is mail that's sent out by members of Congress. And in the postage area, they'll just have the name. It'll say Chuck Schumer in the postage area. And you and I, as the tax-paying public, we're paying the postage on that. And they can select their class of mail. Like they can send stuff out, franked mail, that is non-preferential. They could send it out as standard if they wanted to. And in that case, whatever it says on there, if it says first class, you're going to treat it like first class. If it says standard, you're going to treat it like standard. But if it's just has the name of the member of Congress, then it's by default treated as a first class piece of mail. All right, here's two classes that we're going to combine together. Free matter. We have two types of free mail where people can actually send mail without paying postage at all. This is a public service. Remember, the Postal Service is a service that is operated for the public good. So one of the free types of mail that we can get sometimes is military mail, where if mail is sent from an active combat zone, then they don't have to put postage on it. You and I, the taxpayer, I happily pay the postage for that. For some soldier who's over in Iran right now or wherever, in harm's way, sending stuff back home, no problem. The postage is covered for that, and that is treated as preferential mail. The other type of free matter that we get is free matter for the blind and handicapped. And it'll say that up in the corner, up in the postage area, free matter for the blind and handicapped. That is also a preferential mail class. That is treated no different from any other preferential class. It cannot be delayed, and it cannot be thrown into the UBBM to be shredded, the undeliverable bulk business mail. All right, I think that's all of them. But the important thing, again, is what's below this red line. And as long as you memorize these 4 classes, standard, nonprofit, marketing, bound, print, and matter, you know all there is to know about the classes of mail and preferential and non-preferential mail. So as an example, let's say there's a new class of mail that you've never seen before, and it's called silver mail. If you get a piece of silver mail and it's undeliverable, can you put it into the UBBM? The answer to that is very simple. No, you cannot, because it's not one of these 4 classes. These are the only classes that can go into the UBBM. Everything else has to be treated as preferential mail and either get forwarded or returned as appropriate, and again, it cannot be delayed. So any questions you have on this, just refer to this bottom portion, and that gives you your answer. Oh, here's another type of preferential mail that I should add in here. And that is parcels. Parcels are generally preferential. There is an exception that we'll talk about here in just a sec, but any parcel you get is generally going to be treated as preferential mail. We do get a type of parcel that's called samples, and in some cases you may get, like, I don't know, Dial is sending out little teeny bars of soap for people to try, and they will send them out standard. And it'll say right on the postage, standard, and not standard post or parcel post or anything like that. It just says like pre-sorted standard. And so in that case, if that's undeliverable, yes, in fact, that can go into the UBBM. But as a general rule, if you're not sure, don't put it in the UBBM, because that is an irrevocable error. And once it's in there, it can't be unshredded. So always err on the side of caution if you're not sure. It's not unusual for bound printed matter to look like a catalog or to look like a parcel. A good example of that is the Granger catalog, where it's in a big box oftentimes, and it might even have a delivery confirmation barcode on it, but it's sent out as bound printed matter, which is a non-preferential mail class. Again, this is just a catalog, and the Granger catalog is a good example of why they send that stuff out non-preferential, because they get a big discount from the post office for, putting it all on a pallet and delivering it to your local PNDC or maybe right to your own post office where it can be sorted for delivery. And so it's cheap for Granger to put all that stuff on a pallet and send it off to where it needs to. Well, it's maybe not cheap, but cheaper than sending each piece individually. And so, that goes to businesses. It'll often say, Rex's Automotive or Current Business, and whatever business is there, they're going to get the Granger catalog. And so you think about it from Granger's perspective, much like with the grocery ads, if Rex's Automotive has moved out and now it's Jerry's Automotive, Granger doesn't really care. Just give it to Jerry's Automotive, because it'll say or Current Business. If Rex's Automotive has moved to Florida, does Granger want to spend the money to get this big, heavy catalog shipped off to Florida? No, they don't. They're probably going to get a Granger catalog wherever they move to from the business that used to occupy that place. And likewise, Granger doesn't want all these catalogs back, because the catalog comes out every quarter and they can't really repackage them. It would be a huge waste of money. So if they're not deliverable, then they just throw them into the UBBM. But there is a very important exception, and it typically does apply to the Granger catalogs, and that is the ancillary service endorsement. So write that down here. Put it here. ASE, ancillary service endorsement. Before you put something into the UBBM, you need to check around that envelope and see if there is an ancillary service endorsement. And what those are is like, it says something service requested. It'll say address service requested, electronic service requested, forward service requested, change service requested. Whatever it is, we don't worry about what that service is and what service they're going to get. For our perspective, all that means is that it cannot go into the UBBM because the mailer wants something special done with it if it's undeliverable. So the Grainger catalog, again, as an example, is it probably has electronic service requested on it. And so instead of it just going directly into the shredder, we're going to put that in our return to sender parcels, for example, and we're going to write vacant. And so the electronic service will give Grainger that information electronically that, hey, this unit is vacant, so take it off your mailing list. Don't bother sending out a catalog next month because no business is in this place right now. You'll also see it oftentimes with, various mailers that it'll say address service requested or change service or whatever it is. And that is that mailer. Sometimes it's forwarding service where that mailer wants the piece forwarded. Like maybe it's a bill. Well, a bill would probably be first class, but whatever it is, right? They want something special done with it. And guys, that's a big profit center for the post office because especially in the case of electronic service, all we're doing is like sending that company an email that says, hey, this address is no good, or these people moved, here's their new address, whatever it is. It costs the post office very little money, and we charge for that. And so if that goes into the UBBM, then A, the mailer is not getting the service they wanted, and B, the post office ain't getting that money. And so you always have to check the envelope for an ancillary service endorsement before it goes into the UBBM. And whatever the ancillary service is, again, we don't really care what it is. You're going to do whatever you would normally do with that piece of mail. So even if it says return service on it, if that person has a forward on file, you're going to put it into the CFS rack to be forwarded. And then the computers handle it from there. The PARS system, the Postal Automated Redirection System, handles it from there and takes care of whatever service is requested on that mail piece. So that pretty much covers it. Everything below this red line, everything that's non-preferential, has two things in common. It can be delayed, not by you. It can be delayed by management. Management can instruct you to delay that mail up to the third day. And if it's undeliverable, it can go into the shredder. Standard, nonprofit, marketing, bound printed matter. With the one caveat that you got to check for that ancillary service endorsement before you put it in there. And that's it. These four things, just memorize that. Standard, nonprofit, marketing, bound printed matter. And you are good to go. You know everything that you need to know about the classes of mail. We did it. Guys, thanks for watching. And I will catch you all next time.